Peter's reign is over. This is my news show now. Thanks, Firefly. Welcome, everyone, to your morning news. All right, so we have some movie news to talk about. And because I mentioned the gaming stuff yesterday, one or two people did say, why don't you just do a little gaming news at the end as well? So I might talk about the Bethesda thing today too. But we got some movie news. Kick it off. Tom Cruise might actually, seriously, for reals, be going into space. Him and Doug Liman, the director who's doing this with him, who of course worked on him with Edge of Tomorrow, apparently they're actually scheduled to fly into space or launch into space, whatever the correct term is, on October 2021. So this actually came from the Space Shuttle Almanac, who like they kind of give you all the launches that are coming up over the next 3 years apparently, because these things are planned in advance. So it's not just like it's not like an airport where they're just like, we'll add a flight to the schedule next week. It's just it's not that casual. So yeah, apparently in that almanac, when you get to October 2021, I'll just read this from Deadline directly. Part of the chart reads SpaceX Crew Dragon, with an image of a small space vehicle beside it. Next to the illustration are a list of three names: SpaceX pilot Lopez Alegria, and Tourist 1 Tom Cruise, Tourist 2 Doug Liman, and there's also a third tourist slot that's yet to be filled. So, I mean, it's a while away yet. Things could change, but it seems like they're actually going to make a movie in space, or at least partially in space. Now, there's no actual title for the movie yet, I don't believe, but that is I had to open with this. Tom Cruise, the madman, is going to go to space, and you know what? If this goes badly, I mean, knock on wood, I'm not, I don't want to like tempt the universe here, but if something goes wrong and this is how he dies, I guarantee you this is exactly the way Tom Cruise wants to go, because he's Tom Cruise and he's a maniac. He just has to finish filming his next two Mission Impossible films so that he's got that done under his belt, and yeah, so Tom Cruise is actually going to space to shoot something in October 2021, assuming this sticks and goes to plan. Next up, Ron Howard is working on a biopic of a pianist, a Chinese pianist named who goes by the name of Lang Lang. He's only 38 years old, but he has emerged as one of the biggest and most famous contemporary classical pianists. His memoir documents his remarkable story of his family who believed in his talent and his idea that he's a prodigy so much that they sacrificed almost everything to make sure he could continue on his path. And he's played at the Olympics, he's played at various places. I of course had never heard of him because I don't really follow the world of classical pianists or musicians in general, for that matter. But Ron Howard is doing this once he's wrapped up his current film, which is 13 Lives at MGM. Ron Howard feels like the sort of guy who would do this type of movie. He's done other true stories, of course, between Rush and Apollo 13, and I'm sure there's some other ones that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. It feels like it'll probably be kind of an uplifting story of rags to riches and success and all that sort of heartwarming, and I can see I can hear obviously there's going to be piano on the soundtrack. It's about a pianist, but even if it wasn't, I can hear the piano that will play because it's a Ron Howard movie. Just so yeah, so that's happening. There's no title for it yet. It's currently untitled. So, but the Lang Lang biopic, the pianist biopic. So next up, Bradley Cooper has found his on-screen co-star for Maestro, which is a film that he's doing about Leonard Bernstein and Mrs. Bernstein, Felicia Bernstein to be precise. Carey Mulligan is going to play that character, or that real person, I should say, where of course Cooper is going to be playing Leonard Bernstein himself. So yeah, this is actually teaming up with Spotlight writer Josh Singer, and he's been developing this ever since he basically finished working on A Star Is Born. So Maestro is going to tell a complex love story of Leonard and Felicia, a story that spans over 30 years from the time they met in 1946 at a party and continuing through 2 engagements, a 25-year marriage, and 3 children, Jamie, Alexander, and Nina. So, yeah, it's another biopic, another musician biopic at that. Naturally, I paired these two together, so there you go. I have no. I mean, I'm not a big biopic person. The reason why I've kind of sped through these last two stories is that I tend to not be super excited by it, even when I like know and really care about the person who's having the story told about them. I don't tend to get super excited about them. They tend to be a little schmaltzy and either schmaltzy or dry. They tend to go one or two ways for the most part for me. Um, so not super excited by either, but worth mentioning. Two high-profile biopics coming. We have a release date for a movie that was supposed to come out in May, around US Mother's Day, but is actually going to go on Hulu instead. The new release date is the 20th of November, and it is going to Hulu. Anish Chaganty's Run is the title of the film. Chaganty previously did The Searching, the John Cho, like on the laptop screen movie, like Unfriended, but it wasn't a horror movie. It was more of a mystery thriller with an investigation happening. So it's going to star Sarah Paulson and newcomer Kira Allen. The one notable thing that this is really pointing out here, but I'll read the description first. So here's the Run follows a wheelchair-using homeschool teenager Chloe, played by Allen, who has been raised in isolation by her controlling mother Diane, played by Paulson. As the story unfolds, Chloe begins to uncover bits and pieces of a secret that leads her to believe that her mother is holding a bigger and darker secret from her. So the notable thing here that this article points out, and presumably, even if the film's bad, while it'll get some praise, is that the actor who plays the wheelchair-bound Chloe, Alan, she is actually a wheelchair-using actor. So this is obviously different how movies usually do. Movies usually just hire someone who's an actor, and they'll have them just just put them in a wheelchair or whatever it may be. And obviously, in some films, you have to have someone who isn't actually a wheelchair user because maybe the film doesn't have them in the wheelchair the whole time. You'll have flashbacks where before whatever condition or accident put them in the wheelchair or something like that. But in cases like this, where a character the whole time from start to finish is going to be someone who is confined to a wheelchair or something similar, it does make sense. It makes sense to actually give people who want to act, who are good at acting, who are qualified, and are capable of performing. And the only thing that has stopped them up until now is that the Hollywood or the film industry doesn't typically go looking for actual people who are disabled. They go for just regular actors. So this is kind of a big deal for that, if nothing else. This was supposed to come out around Mother's Day, and given that it's the whole plot's around a mother and daughter, it kind of makes sense. So that should be interesting. I don't know. I mean, obviously it's a thriller. Run's the new film. Searching, which I did see, I thought was okay. It was not a bad watch. I didn't regret watching it. It had its moments, but it also maybe went a bit too far with the reveals and things like that. I'd be worried that maybe this will go down the same path. And I actually just saw Sarah Paulson in the pilot for Ratched, the Netflix show that Ryan Murphy did. Now, I can't really blame her for that, but that said, she's very heavily associated with Ryan Murphy, and I don't really like those shows. So her association with this does give me a slight kind of vibe right away. But it's not that she's bad. It's not really that there's anything wrong with her. It's just that association thing, because I just recently saw her in something I didn't like. But yeah, so that's coming to the Hulu on November 20th. Next up, IFC Films, or more specifically IFC Midnight, have acquired the North American rights to Hunter x Hunter, which is a thriller written and directed by Sean Linden and stars Devon Sawa and Nick Stahl. And those are two names that you don't hear about that often these days. Nick Stahl, of course, the John Connor from the pretty bad Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, a film that for many years I thought was just mediocre, but then when I watched it again for our sci-fi movie podcast, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, check it out. When I watched it again for that, I was like, wait, this is way worse than I remembered. This is actually terrible. So that's all, neither here nor there. This is coming out on December 18th in theaters and on demand. The film's about a family living in a remote wilderness as fur trappers. Joseph Mersal, his wife Anne, and their daughter Renee think their traps are being hunted by the return of a rogue bear. Sorry, not a rogue bear. A rogue wolf. That's a very different animal. But I looked away from the thing to check the recording status, and I just sort of filled in the word with Earth that I wanted, basically. So Joseph leaves them behind to go and track it and deal with it. Anne and Renee grow increasingly anxious during Joseph's prolonged absence and struggle to survive without him. And their paranoia only grows when a man, played by Nick Stahl, who has been severely injured and left for dead, shows up on their doorstep. So that sounds like right away that he probably ran into the husband and has killed the husband and has now stumbled to the house. At least that's what it sounds from the description. Maybe that's too obvious. Maybe it'll do something else with it in the movie. But it seems like that's what it's certainly hinting at now. So I don't know if this feels like a Christmassy film, but it's coming out December 18th. It doesn't sound bad though, per se. I mean, none of those actors filming with anything, exciting. Like I'm not excited by any of these names. This is might be something that just comes and goes and no one pays attention to it and no one talks about it. But it's not a terrible idea. Like, I could see a well-directed version of this actually really milking the tension of, can they trust this guy, and milking it for us. Like, can we trust him? Do we think he's like some murderer who killed the husband, or is that just one big giant red herring? Is that the point of the movie? Is that you just jump to that conclusion, and there's actually far more to it than that. There's far more, interesting. I'd probably lean towards it wouldn't be, but you never know. You never know. Things surprises. Things surprises. I still blame Nick Stahl a little bit for Terminator 3, even though he was only in it, but still. Association. Association's a big thing. Next up, Studio Canal has got the rights, optioned the film rights to Matt Haig's best-selling novel, The Midnight Library. They've already optioned another book by him called How to Stop Time from 2017. But The Midnight Library, character of Nora finds herself in a library between life and death, with the chance to experience all the potential lives she could have lived. The book has sold in 25 territories, if I say that properly, worldwide, and the audiobook, funnily enough, was read by Carey Mulligan, who we mentioned just a few stories ago. Yeah, not a lot to go on here. Sounds very obviously fantastical, and I'm not really familiar with this writer's work, but definitely seems like something they're going to be pushing, so very worth mentioning. The last movie story that I'm going to tell you about today is Wattpad. I laugh every time they come out in the TV news, so I'm going to laugh here too. Wattpad and Collective Pictures are teaming up to develop a film called Float, based on a story written by Kate Marchant. Not Merchant, Marchant. Just which is why I said it weird. So Robbie Amell is going to be in this. He's also going to produce it. One of the other producers also worked with him on Code 8, which was a film that we actually did also in the Ace. I'm promoting the Atomic Cinema Experiment a lot today. But he's going to be in this. The description of the film is as follows. After her parents' messy divorce, Waverly finds herself yanked from her comfortable life in Alaska to spend the summer in her aunt's sunny beach town. If this paradigm shift wasn't jarring enough, Waverly quickly begins to clash with one of her new neighbours, and the polar opposite of everything she represents, an arrogant, jaded beach bum named Blake. Try as she might to avoid him, however, she finds fitting in with her new beachside community just as difficult thanks to a teeny tiny embarrassing secret that she can't swim. That is until her new nemesis, who happens to be the town's lifeguard, offers to teach her. So I assume this is kind of a opposites attract romance with a surfer bro played by Robbie Amell. I assume this is the premise. That said, he's an adult, and she, it mentions here she's after her parents' messy divorce, which makes me think she's a teenager. So unless we're doing some sort of creepy age difference here, with an underage girl, maybe that's not the way it's going, or maybe I've just misunderstood what age she's supposed to be. Or actually, you know what? To be fair, it never actually mentions that he's playing that character. It's entirely possible that he actually might be someone else. But naturally, you've got your hunky leading man here, presumably, is going to play the hunky leading man surfer bro role. Makes sense to me, but we'll see. I'm likely to forget this exists. It's called Float, just to reiterate the title. It's always good to say the title again at the end of the article, unless the Unless it's untitled, in which case you just say it's untitled and this is the main person that's involved or whatever. So there you go. That's today's movie stories that I happened to catch and thought were worth mentioning. So yeah, and I'll round off with a little bit of gaming discussion here. So I mean, I guess that this is supposed to be movie news, but it's a new show. It's evolving. Now it's just Peter talks about news from the last day that's interesting, mainly movie, but occasionally other things tacked on at the end. So if you don't care about anything else after the movies, you can just thank you for watching. Bye bye. But if you're sticking around, so the big thing that happened not yesterday but the day before now was it ZeniMax, is it the parent company of Bethesda, was outright purchased by Microsoft, bringing Bethesda to the Xbox games family, as they put it in several tweets themselves, which is kind of a big deal. And it's interesting, and it's exciting to watch this. Like, the start of this generation of video game consoles is kind of wild, and we have this thing where last time Microsoft screwed up so much. Xbox screwed up so much back in 2013 that they were basically just a laughing stock at the time. The memes about them, everything, the attitude towards them, all the stuff they were trying to enforce that they then reverted on, and when they did revert on it, they looked even worse because they kept insisting that they couldn't revert them for a number of months, and the whole thing was kind of just an own goal, if you will. But you fast forward to 2020, and you have a Microsoft who, I don't think have good first-party games, not to the same extent that Sony do. But you have an Xbox who are trying to be a lot more consumer-friendly. They've got a lot more options for people. Game Pass, the service they're trying to promote, where it's basically a Netflix of games, with all of their first-party games going in there day one, which sounds amazing on paper. Like I say, my enthusiasm for it's always been dampened by the fact that I don't really care about any of the games, but on paper, it's really good. Like, the actual system and the promise of what it is very good. And they've been buying a few studios in the last couple of years. NXIL, Obsidian, which, should lead to big things. I know Obsidian's got that big RPG they're making that they revealed earlier this year, which is an Xbox and PC exclusive. So them getting Bethesda, which if you don't immediately think of what that means, what games that involves, that includes, stick with me here, Doom, Fallout, the Elder Scrolls games. It includes Prey, Evil Within. It includes Wolfenstein, Dishonored, all these things. Right? This is the company that own all these IP, and the studios that make all those games. That's a pretty big deal. And there's a lot of fuzziness right now. They're kind of trying to, Bethesda's saying that, hey, we still publish your own games, implying that they're still going to be coming to PlayStation and things like that. I don't believe they will for a second. Not past a certain point. I think there's a couple of commitments they have where they have deals with PlayStation, because two of their upcoming games are timed exclusives, Deathloop and Tokyo Ghostwire. Those are going to be honored because those deals were already made. But I think once we get past that, once the obligations of whatever previous contracts were said, some people are convinced they're going to actually still publish games on PlayStation. I mean, I'm not going to say it's impossible, because they still have Minecraft on there, and Xbox, Microsoft do own that. But I'm pretty sure once we get to a certain point, even if they start off with playing a sort of third-party-esque game, unless things drastically change, I do fully believe that we're going to have exclusive Elder Scrolls on Xbox and PC, exclusive Fallout, exclusive Wolfenstein, Dishonored, whatever they happen to do. I honestly think it's going that way, which doesn't really bother me. As someone who's pre-ordered a PS5, I don't really care. Not because I don't care about those games, although I'm kind of hit and miss with Bethesda, but they do make the Evil Within games that I really like, but that's more of a personal note. I think the reason why I don't really care is because I also play games on PC. So anything that goes to Xbox that doesn't come to PlayStation goes on PC too. So I'm not locked out of anything. I'm not really fussed on that level. It's fascinating to watch, though. It's fascinating to watch this because I do think that this genuinely gives Xbox more of at least on paper, equilibrium with the Sony first party. Again, taste obviously varies wildly, and I would still say I love Naughty Dog's games more than I love anything from that Bethesda's ever put out. And in recent years, Insomniac, between Ratchet and Clank and Spider-Man, I really loved, and what else have they had? God of War was really good. Like they've been doing a lot of great first party. Not everything's been great. I mean, I didn't like Ghost of Tsushima at all. I played that for like 3 hours and then never touched it again. Boring Ubisoft style crap. The hot takes are coming, but this is exciting from the perspective that one of the big problems with the Xbox, even when they've been making a lot of these right choices in the last couple of years, is that yeah, but you still really only have Halo, Gears of War, and Forza, and if I don't care about those, it doesn't really matter. And this is them saying, oh, hey, look at that. We have now a bunch of games. We have a library of games, which, first of all, even the back catalogue all going to Game Pass makes Game Pass better for a start. And then you have all these new games, which I do think after a point are going to be exclusive and are not going to be on PlayStation. Unless the industry completely changes and we get to a point where Sony and Microsoft shake hands and Game Pass ends up on PlayStation. And then everything changes. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you know, who knows what changes? Because this news came out of nowhere. This news just shocked everyone on Monday. It was a big industry game-changing thing. So I'm excited by this because competition is good. And I think Sony recently haven't done anything too egregious as far as I'm concerned. Some people are ready to start yelling, you know, arrogant Sony at them, just like the PS3 era. They're nothing like the PS3 era right now. That said, there has been a lot of things that they've just not bothered doing. They don't seem to be concerned with backwards compatibility, you know, before the PS4. What's his name, Jim Ryan? He's not as good as a leader, as a public speaker, as some of the past frontmen we've had, like Jack Tretton or Sean Layden. He kind of puts his foot in it a lot by saying really bold things that he kind of then contradicts later, or just incorrect, or nothing like super extreme, but just enough that it's a little dickish. That's how to describe it. Sometimes it'd be better just not doing interviews, I think. You know, and obviously you've got Game Pass on the other side, so all of a sudden he's raising prices of the games on next gen suddenly makes it even look more compelling, and all the rest of it. I was never going to be swayed to not buy a PS5, and if I wasn't going to buy a PS5, I wouldn't be buying a console. I'd just be sticking with PC. But they still have all the first party games I want. I'm looking forward to Miles Morales. I'm even looking forward to Demon's Souls, even though I've still never finished a Souls game. Maybe this will be the time because it looks gorgeous. And the first party lineup is looking really good. But there is an issue here where they don't have what I think was before now a clear, fairly objective, right? Because I think, like I say, subjectively, I still prefer Sony's first party games for the most part. Not all of them, obviously. But from an objective level, I do think that you could say before that Sony's first party far outweighed Microsoft's. Like, Sony were putting out first party games left and right in the last few years over the PS4, and the vast majority of them were being very critically acclaimed. They were selling very well, doing fantastic stuff. And I remembered this because I remembered the end of the 360 PS3 generation was kind of a similar thing where Sony kind of finally got its act together because the PS3 started really poorly. A lot of the exclusives in those first couple of years, I never even played them because I didn't have a PS3 at the time because there was nothing I wanted to play. But you know, they didn't last. They all kind of faded away, and people have kind of forgotten about, I don't know what, Haze and whatever else they put out in those first few years. And not all of them. I'm not saying every single one. Don't take this as completely 100% blanket statements, but generally speaking. But by the end of the PS3, I remember, okay, so you started getting more Naughty Dog games, you started getting other things coming out. And I remember 360, the exclusive just kind of dried up. If you didn't care about Gears and Halo and Forza, by the time you got to the last couple of years of the 360, there was almost nothing else that they had that was like unique to them. And I don't think Xbox One's lifespan really changed much to that opinion. Obviously, they had a couple of things. Obviously, you associate Ori and the Blind Forest with them, and you associate, I mean, what was that weird game, the pirate one? Like, but nothing like huge. Nothing that felt like is a big blockbuster, gargantuan game like a lot of the Sony first party games. And I feel like this purchase of Bethesda instantly on paper says, hey, people love the shit out of Elder Scrolls. Skyrim is one of the best selling games of all time. The next one is probably going to be exclusive. And that all of a sudden, and then you add on the other franchises and the other IP and the other new IP they're probably going to create with these studios, all of a sudden, it doesn't feel lopsided anymore. All of a sudden, it feels competitive. and I think that's kind of exciting. So, even as someone who's, like, again, I'll play anything I want because I'll just play the Xbox games on PC. But as someone who's typically preferred PlayStation just because I prefer their games, this is exciting to me because competition is great, and I want competition to force Sony to make even better consumer-friendly moves and do, even better things. I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily think games can necessarily get, better. That's a really weird thing to say. I mean, they're getting better in the typical sense, but you know what I mean. Like, I'm not saying that they're going to magically find some new formula or something like that. I just mean Sony will be better to us if they think they have to keep us convinced to not go with the other side, and vice versa. That's what competition does, and that's exciting. So, and whether that means Sony tries to buy companies, I don't know. Microsoft still seem trigger happy with buying more places. If they buy more places, maybe Sony says, hey, we need to put a ring on some fingers. I mean, I do expect them to get Bluepoint, but that's not the same thing. That's like a much smaller thing. Well, I mean, it would be a great get, don't get me wrong. Like, but between Shadow of the Colossus and now Demon Souls, it feels like they're kind of courting them, kind of in the same way that Insomniac didn't actually get bought by Sony until the last couple of years. I can't remember the exact time, but it was after Spider-Man. And, they'd been associated with PlayStation for a long time. They had one Xbox game, Sunset Overdrive, but, they've been doing Ratchet and Clank for years, and they've been doing Resistance and stuff, and they obviously had Spider-Man, so it just made a lot of sense when they finally did that, but it'd be very interesting to see. So now I'm excited for there actually being competition, and what does this mean? Does it mean PlayStation are more convinced to start some sort of Game Pass thing, or does it just mean no? We have to have even more first party games that are big, that people care about, that sell a lot, that feel prestigious, that feel like they're worth the premium that they're going to cost because they're not in a service like Game Pass, and that's a tough challenge. And yeah, for me, stuff like Last of Us, which I love, and God of War and Spider-Man do kind of fit that premium, but we'll see, and we'll see because if things shift a little bit, it's hard to tell right now because everything's selling out. All the consoles sell out at launch, but and this is the thing, like all these promises of exclusives from Microsoft, it's going to be a couple of years before we actually get to that point because, like, we know 2 of the games for next year are actually PlayStation exclusives because of previous deals. So it's going to take a couple of years before we get to that point, but the promise here is that in a couple of years' time, we're going to start getting these big games that you can get on PlayStation, and that's probably quite good for competition. The downside to this, of course, is if they both start buying up lots of publishers and developers, that it may have a bit of a negative effect on the industry where everything's owned by one of 2 companies, and that could be terrible. Not that I suspect some of the bigger ones will go. I'm just on the extreme end of things. In the same way that Disney buying up Star Wars and Marvel and then Fox starts to feel a little bit like, eek, this is kind of bad for the movie industry. It could get to that point if they keep doing it, but I think some competition to light some fires under each other is good. And, maybe Sony would have made a few better choices with the PS5, which I don't think they've made too many bad choices, to be honest. I don't think it's been that big a deal, largely. Like, this is nothing like the PS3. It doesn't feel like they've been completely turned into arrogant pricks because of the PS4 success, but it isn't as humble as the start of the PS4 was. And if we can keep them a little bit humble by having Microsoft actually putting up a real fight, and it feels like they are, it really does, then that's good for anyone playing on either console, quite frankly, or PC. Everyone wins in that scenario. So I think it's positive news for the most part. I do. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But there you go. I'll talk about. I might talk about some more gaming news at the end of some of these if there's stuff to talk about. But there you go. So thank you very much for joining me. Please do hit the like button. Liking super important on YouTube, and it helps keep all the content coming. And share your thoughts on any of the news stories in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. Get us on the Twitters at mail_fuzz for channel updates. Check out patreon.com/mailfuzztv if you want to support the channel financially. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. And if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.